So good to see you this evening. And the first question is, we can apply the 5 questions. Is there a shape or a color to what occurs? Does it come from somewhere? Does it stay? Does it go? We can apply this to both the content of the mind and the mind itself. So the question is, do these questions, if they're applied to the content of the mind or to the mind itself, do they have a different function? They have different functions. When we focus on the content of the mind, whatever kind of experience we're having, then we see the impermanence of everything which occurs. A thought is not here, then it's gone. And same with sensations, feelings, memories, plans, and so on. And that's because thoughts, sensations, feelings are like our shoes and our bananas and onions. That is to say, they are forms of experience. If you have an onion and you put it in your hand and you turn it around, the onions tend to have a slightly irregular shape and the color of the skin varies. You cannot catch the onion except by the use of a concept which only catches another concept and not the onion itself. This, as we've looked in the past, this is the same with all the phenomena in the world. The mind cannot catch the thing itself because the thing is emptiness. So the contents of the mind are revelations which remain uncatchable. The mind itself is not a revelation. It never shows itself directly, and yet it's similar to its own content in that it is also ungraspable. The graspable object and the grasping mind are both patterns of impermanent energy. There is no fixed grasping subject and no fixed graspable object. So that's the reason we look at these questions again and again, is to relax from the need to be tensing and grasping and hoping, so that we can simply be relaxed and open however life is. So now this next question is that the stainless original nature is prior to time and space, and in that sense it is permanent. And it can be realized, and such realization depends on causes and conditions, such as having a teacher, hearing the teachings, and so on. Given all this, how can the non-dual traditions teach that Buddhahood is permanent and forever a forever non-backsliding form or condition? Well, this is an interesting and quite complex question, because as we have looked sometimes, we have the vehicles of the cause and the vehicles of the result. The vehicles of the cause start with me as a limited sentient being. I am in touch with my limitations, and therefore I need to make effort to get beyond my limitations and develop the qualities of Buddhahood. So what we need to be very clear here is that this is a view. It is a way of seeing. And according to the way of viewing or seeing, you have the revelation of an aspect of the world. So If you look at a bit of a leaf with your eyes, you see certain patterns. And if you put it in a microscope and gave it a magnification by 2, you would see something slightly different. Then if you increase the magnification by 5, by 10, by 20, at each stage you get a different revelation. None of these views is the truth of the leaf. What it is the truth of the revelation of the potential of the leaf according to the magnification. So this is like the Buddhist view. We have many different ways of viewing the world. We can look in terms of obscurations, in terms of the 5 poisons, in terms of the history of ignorance. But we can also look in terms of the result. That is to say, we can look from the point of view of the openness of the mind. So as with regard to these 5 questions, when we apply the 5 questions to the mind, we realize the mind has no existence of itself, and yet there is a mind. The emptiness of the mind is intrinsic, it is unborn. It has no beginning or end. This is what is permanent. Whether you see this or not depends on circumstances. That is to say, whether your gaze is mediated through the content of the mind or whether it is direct. If I try to understand myself in terms of the content of my mind, in terms of my history, my moods, my health, my education, and so on, these experiences are all impermanent. And therefore, the conclusions that I come to by relying on these impermanent experiences will also be impermanent. This is why our meditation practice focuses on not being active, not constructing, not trying to improve, but simply relaxing into the openness of the presence of awareness. So it's very important that we understand the different views of Dharma and choose the view which suits our own constitution and the direction of our way of experiencing the world. Delusion arises from believing that the impermanent content of the mind is establishing the truth of the mind. So if I'm happy, I can honestly say I'm happy. But that happiness arises from causes and conditions. So while it is true that I am happy, actually I'm happy for a while according to the patterning of the causes and conditions. The mind itself is neither happy nor sad. The ending of delusion is to see the illusory nature of what is arising and to realize that there is no substance to it. So if I go to the cinema with someone and afterwards I'm saying it wasn't a very good film, I thought the main part of it was ridiculous, I'm talking about an illusion as if it was something real. A lot of money has gone into making this illusion as believable as possible. But all that effort doesn't make it any more than an illusion. If I believe that the illusion is real, then I am deluded. So when we see illusion as illusion and don't invest it with a false reality, don't invest it with any sense of inherent existence, then it is self-liberating. Okay, so then the next question. I used to look at my body sensations as signals telling me about my needs. For example, I'm so tired, I need to rest. But now, when I try not to merge and not to separate myself from the field of experience, sometimes it turns out that I'm ignoring these signals and then I abuse myself. How is it possible to take care of my own borders and energetic resources according to the Dzogchen view? I feel I'm getting lost somewhere. So the issue here is about the approach of our sitting practice and the approach of our moving in the world practice. When we are sitting, our basic approach is not to enter into judgment, because we want to experience the raw, naked, uncooked, unprepared immediacy of what is occurring. The less of our own habitual energy, our capacity to form patterns out of this basic potential of experience and interpret it in particular ways, the less we do of that, the more we clearly see how it is. So in that situation, if a sensation is arising, in say a pain in your back, as long as your basic posture is okay, that the line of the spine is there, you're not contorting your body, you're not stressing yourself, then if a pain comes, we don't try to investigate it or do anything with it. Because the basic position in Dzogchen is, I want to see the world without me. My sense of self, my historically developed attitudes and views seem, from the point of view of my ego self, to illuminate how it is. But from the point of view of Dzogchen, this self is a veil, a distorting barrier, an obscuration. The mind is open and empty like the sky, and all experience is arising in this space or sky of the mind. Some arisings look like rainbows, some look like clouds. By not getting involved through attributing value, oh, rainbows are better than clouds, then we see that the rainbows and the clouds move in the sky and dissolve into the sky, and the sky is unchanging. The mind is open and includes everything. Nothing which occurs can touch or distort or contaminate the mind itself. Now, when we get up from the practice, this necessarily brings with it some sense of our embodiment as a form moving in a world of illusory forms. And so we're entering into a field of relationality. So, for example, if I make a coffee and I pick it up when it's hot, if I take a big gulp, oh, it's as if I'm burning my mouth. Oh, this is a sensation. This is telling me something. The coffee is too hot. Just sip it a little at a time. Now, the coffee is not real. It's not really hot. It's situationally hot. If we leave it for half an hour, it will not be hot. It's hot now, and in this situation, with my mouth as it is now, we have a pattern of experience which is generated. So now the inside of my mouth is tingling. Ooh, it's not very pleasant. This is a relational problem. This is indicating as I move in the world, I have to be aware of my capacity, my shape, my health, whether my clothing is adequate for the winter weather which is coming, and so on. So this is, according to our familiar saying, this is working with circumstances. In London, it's been raining a lot, and there are many wet leaves on the pavement, so the surface is a bit slippery. So I walk on these leaves with a little bit more attention than I would if the pavement was clean and dry. Now, I don't need to develop a narrative, oh, the pavements are dangerous, I could have an accident. That would be telling myself about something. I simply have to stay attentive to the actual formation of the world as I participate with it. Because the slipperiness of the leaves will also depend on the kind of soles that I have on the shoes I'm wearing. So if we are working with circumstances, moment by moment, we are participating in a field of revelation, or new patterns of the environment are arising with the new patternings of myself. So I'm not starting from a proposition, oh, I know how to walk, I know how to deal with any situation. It's not like that. I move with the shape of the world. My shape alters the shape of the world. The shaping of the world alters my shape. This is a dynamic, interactive unfolding. As I've indicated many times, our approach is not heroic. We're not seeking to dominate the world or make it comply with our intention. Rather, we are collaborating with the optimal potential of this moment of revelation. So if you're tired, have a rest. If you have to be close to people you don't like, then take care. If you have a boss at work who is very unpleasant, then you can see him as a swirling mass of 5 colored snakes representing the 5 poisons which are manifesting. Tantra is full of practices of the imagination. The imagination indicates that everything is an illusion. So the key thing is not to feel trapped by a definition coming from the outside into you, or from you onto the outside. So if you need to keep your job and you don't like your boss, that is not a final situation. You can sit in a meeting with your boss and say prayers for them. Or you can imagine that when they die, they will go to hell and they're being roasted and they're being cut in little pieces and so on. Nothing is real. Everything is interpreted. Okay, so next question. I still often treat the time of meditation as more important, more sacred than the time of my daily activities. What can I do to change this view? What can I do to avoid making the time after meditation less meaningful? So this indicates operating inside a hierarchy of values, so that certain aspects of the world are said to be special and important, and other aspects ordinary and not very important. Now, if you are practicing devotion, then we say, oh, the Buddha is much better than you. you are in a mess. The Buddha is very clear. So that's why I pray to the Buddha and the Buddha doesn't pray to me. But that's a very relative truth positioning. It's a method for generating devotion and faith and commitment to the Dharma path. But when we enter into the paths of Tantra and Dzogchen and Mahamudra, we see that all phenomena have the quality of being the radiance of the ground. The openness of the Buddha's mind gives rise to these illusory phenomena coming and going. So we have these two aspects. We have the Madhyamika view that everything is emptiness, only emptiness. That is the sole truth of all phenomena. And then from the point of view of the Yogacara philosophy, we have the understanding, yes, everything is empty, and yet here it is, it's showing. All phenomena are equal in their emptiness. And yet they can be differentiated according to their appearance. So, with regard to the question, from our sitting practice, we want to bring the openness of the understanding of everything moving in space so that everything is even in its being an aspect of space, yet differentiated according to its impact and function. So that in terms of comparing eating ice cream and meditating, if I want to develop diabetes, eating a lot of ice cream is good. Meditation won't help me get diabetes. So what is it I want? If I want to have more space, more insight, more clarity, then relatively speaking, meditation is better than ice cream. So this is very, very important. When we think of dependent origination or dependent arising, the formulation is on the basis of this, that arises. So on the basis of wanting to increase clarity and awaken to how my mind actually is, then meditation is very helpful. If I want to develop my skills as a cook, meditation is not so helpful. On the basis of this, that arises. What is it that I want to arise? Although the mind is inherently clear, on a relative level, we can develop the clarity of the mind according to whether we do the practice or not. So we cannot say that meditation is better than eating ice cream. It depends. Everything depends. This is the meaning of dependent. The Buddha is better than ordinary people. It depends. When the communists were in a very aggressive mode in Tibet, the sight of the Buddha statue made people very angry. On the basis of wanting to fulfill the vision of Mao Zedong, the destruction of the monasteries and the statues and paintings was very important. It depends. We may believe that the statue of the Buddha is very beautiful and very sacred and holy and important. But the statue of the Buddha has no inherent value. If I have devotion, I project the value into the statue. And if I don't have devotion, I don't project value. There are in in the world of the trade in Oriental antiques, there are many gangs of professional thieves who travel around and break into monasteries and steal statues. And sometimes they simply cut the statue off at the ankles because they can't separate the foot from the base. On the basis of the desire to have money, the statue is a commodity to be sold. But the next day, when the people who have devotion come and they look at this little stumps of feet left, they think, oh, how is this possible? How could anyone do this? It's very easy. People can do it because they don't believe the same as you. So this is relative truth. The absolute truth is that everything is empty. This emptiness offers the potential to manifest interconnectivity and act with kindness to all beings. But it also offers the potential to manifest the thought, me first, I'm the most important, I don't care about you. The difference between these two positions is whether you recognize your own basic ground or source or you don't. So now we have another question. How did traditional practitioners in Tibet deal with their emotions? So with regard to what we've already looked at tonight, we see that this question is very vague because it depends on the view that the traditional practitioners were employing. If people had taken monastic vows and were following the traditional Vinaya instructions, they would seek to control the expression of their rough emotions. But if they were yogis, they might express their emotions to the cave they are living in, shouting into the wind, dancing in the rain, or behaving in strange ways. Nowadays, we have hospitals where people can have operations. We trust that the doctors can cut us open and do things inside us and then stitch us up again. Because the surgeon has been practicing cutting up dead bodies and is able to predict what's inside. Now, you can look at the emotions in your mind, but often it's easier to know that you're angry by shouting at someone. Now, if your intention is to develop wisdom and compassion, and you're using the opportunity of being angry to recognize the nature of anger, then this is also virtuous. But if you're just using the opportunity to dump your shit on someone else, then it's not dharma. So we can't have general conclusion. It always depends. There is a traditional saying that the behaviors which bind ordinary beings into samsara are the very path of liberation for yogis. But being a yogi is not like being a school teacher. It's not an occupation. It's a quality of presence. So if you are going to follow the path of yoga, then we have to maintain the non-duality of appearance and emptiness, anger and emptiness, desire and emptiness, pride and emptiness, jealousy and emptiness. So this question has a second part, which is, why in the West are we so serious about the theme of my practice? The short answer is because we are stupid. Because we think if things are holy, they should be taken seriously. I have to do my practice. No one should disturb me. I'm doing something special. This is more important than anything else. All these statements are very pompous. in any situation, the arising of self is the arising of other. I want to meditate, the neighbors want to play loud rock and roll. How to meditate with rock and roll? There is sound. We know that sound is vibration. We can fall into the melody and seek to track the melody and predict it. Or we can stay with the immediacy of sound as it manifests moment by moment. If we follow this latter approach, then we can integrate whatever is occurring into our practice. Our practice is not something to be protected. Our practice is to relax into the intrinsic openness of the mind, which doesn't need any protection. Okay, so then we have another question, which is, there is a lesser emphasis on long silent retreats in our tradition than, for example, in the Zen or Theravadan traditions. What is the reason for this? It always depends on the view, what you are trying to do. The Theravadan tradition is focused on non-reactivity, to develop a calm, clear mind which is not distracted by the arising of thoughts. And so we want to have an ever increasingly subtle meditative absorption. Because it is subtle, it requires careful support. This is the path of the first turning of the Buddha's, of the wheel of Dharma by Shakyamuni Buddha, where he's concerned with suffering, impermanence, and absence of inherent existence in the person. The Zen tradition is a Mahayana tradition, linked to the Mahayana Sutras. It's concerned with non-reliance on linguistic formation. So its aim is towards signlessness and without hope or aspiration, and emptiness, which are the three marks or the three signifiers of liberation. So in the Zen tradition, they don't study very much, but sit for a long time, allowing appearances to arise without being built on into structures of interpretation. Because we have a lot of attachment and karmic history, this is very difficult to do. Well, for Tantra and Dzogchen and Mahamudra, these are called the easy path or the quick path, in which we use the obstacles or obscurations that the Theravadan and the Zen Buddhists are trying to overcome. We use them as our path. And so for that reason, we don't sit for a long time. What we want is freshness, not struggle. We're not overcoming something. We're relaxing ourselves out of our self-construct, which is artificial, so that we can be present in the intrinsic openness of the mind and thereby experience the transience of all that occurs in the mind, or in the language of Dzogchen, it's self-liberation. So the second part of this question is, when everything is empty and thoughts and feelings and emotions are mere constructs, how does one not become nihilistic about everything? And the question continues, I recently lost a friend, and it is hard to grieve without thinking that this sadness is just a construct of the mind. It feels like dismissing my emotion. So the issue here is the dualizing or the separation of emptiness from appearance. So we have to go back to the Heart Sutra. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is not other than form. Grief is emptiness. Emptiness is not other than grief. Anger is emptiness. Emptiness is not other than anger. All the phenomena of samsara and nirvana are inseparable from emptiness. That is to say, they have no self-substance. Therefore, what is required is to relax oneself from fixation in the polarities. If my friend hadn't died but had stayed alive, that would have been better. That's an interpretation. They were alive and they died. I liked them when they were alive, and now I'm sad that they are dead. Both the feeling of liking and the feeling of grief are empty of self-substance. My friend was changing moment by moment with circumstances. My friend manifested in many forms, but did not exist as someone or something. This is the unification of appearance and emptiness. No one died. Now, this is difficult to understand. You have to look again and again to see the impermanence of phenomena. I was very fond of my mother. And so I can tell you various things about my mother. But these are ideas and memories and constructs. My thoughts about my mother cannot produce the actuality of my mother. The actuality of my mother was ungraspable because she changed according to circumstances. There's no essential or definable or predictable mother. But being a stupid person, I invent my idea of my mother and then convince myself that my own idea of my mother is the truth of my mother. And after many years of being in Dharma, when I see what I was doing, it makes me sad. Because by being attached to my idea about my mother, I didn't see my mother in the dynamic immediacy of her manifestation. This is why the texts say grasping makes you stupid. It doesn't mean that it makes you unintelligent and not able to pass your exams. The basis of the stupidity is substituting conceptual elaboration for the direct, immediate freshness of the inseparability of appearance and emptiness. So the key point is not to limit yourself, not to decide in advance that some emotions are unacceptable, but to stay with the freshness of the emotion as it arises and to allow it to pass. Okay, so next question. What is meant by exhaustion of the phenomena? Or sentences like, when you see unobstructedly without an object, this is the view. Exhaustion of phenomena means exhaustion of the delusion that phenomena exist as something in themselves. So with the example I just gave you of my mother for me is full of my thoughts and feelings about my mother. Having filled my mother with my thoughts about her, I couldn't see her. So by sitting with the actuality of thoughts, feelings, memories, we see that they are ungraspable and self-vanishing. And therefore, we don't fill them with our own projections. The fullness of phenomena is the fullness of our interpretation. And of course, what we see in the world in terms of politics is that this fullness of phenomena depends on your position. Some people think Mr. Putin is very good, other people think he's very bad. This is the same for all these world leaders. Is Putin good or bad? It depends. Putin is a product of dependent origination. He doesn't exist in and of himself. He is a construct, as is Netanyahu and so on. So when you see, the second aspect is saying, when you see unobstructedly without an object, that is the view. So when you see a picture of Mr. Putin, you see color and shape. You put the Putin into Putin, especially when you want to put the Putin. That's too much. That's an English joke. Because Mr. Putin is not an object except for those who are engaged in objectification. He is, as he manifests, he is a potential. And that potential is revealed for us in the co-emergence of the open, empty potential of the formation and the potential of our mind to interpret. So in that sense, there is no object. So then we are seeing unobstructedly. I see and I believe. You could have two streams like that. But when you merge these streams and then you think, oh, I know what this guy Putin is like. He is like this. Then what you are actually seeing is a reflection of your own mind. The Putin you imagine is existing out there is a construct formulated from your own interpretation, from your politics, your ethics, and so on. So the next aspect of this question is, are phenomena the reflections of the mirror? Yes, if we use that metaphor, yes, then they are indeed reflections. Then the second bit here is, how can they disappear? Well, you have to keep looking at the mirror. When you just focus on the mirror, never mind what is put in front of the mirror, just look in the mirror, you see the reflection arises from the mirror and then vanishes into the mirror. It hasn't come from somewhere, it hasn't stayed somewhere, it doesn't go anywhere. Because the reflection never separated from the mirror. It was in the mirror, but not born out of the mirror. And so, like an unborn ghost, it just vanishes. So the second question is, can stillness and movement be experienced separately? Better to do your practice to find the answer for this. To find the stillness of your mind, you have to not rely on the movement of thoughts about the mind. What I would say is that stillness and movement are both signs. They are linguistic signs. When you go out on the road, you see road signs which point, don't park here, or no entry to this new road. We're used to signs referring to something. So we began by looking at the 5 questions. So we start to see, oh, the concepts I have in my mind are tools for elaborating patterns of concepts. So if I think a lot about stillness and movement and I have a sense of what they might mean, this is likely to be an obscuration for the actual practice. Is, in simple terms, when we sit, we are aiming for stillness. When we get up from the sitting practice, we are engaging with movement. For yogis, the fulfillment of the practice is to see that there is no true difference between what occurs while sitting and what occurs afterwards. So somebody is saying that they have had glimpses of what seems to be the nature of the mind, that they have confidence in the open freshness of this experience. Then they say, however, I haven't received a direct transmission from any Dzogchen master. My question is it possible to recognize the nature of mind by ourselves, or do we need a direct transmission? In order to have a direct experience, you don't need transmission. As they say, you can have this experience in orgasm, through sneezing, through slipping on the street, a sudden intense experience which shocks you out of the seeming linear continuity of your self-construct. That can occur in all sorts of situations. Some people get it from being very sick, having fever or COVID. However, if we want to find out how to rest in the openness and to not interfere with it so that it becomes the ground source of every experience which arises for us, then probably we need transmission. But there's some confusion about the meaning of transmission. It's not that somebody can give you something, but they help to put you in the way of it. So it would be as if you went to a Alexander Technique teacher or Feldenkrais teacher, and they might ask you to stand straight. And then they start to move your shoulders, tuck in the base of your spine or whatever. Now you're straight. You thought you were straight before because you have become used to feeling that you are straight when you are not. So the transmission is a chance to see, oh, what I thought was the case is not the case. This is different. Now, this moment doesn't last very long. You have been believing nonsense for a very long time. In English, we say, better the devil you know. That is to say, you are familiar with how to be in an ego consciousness, a self-referential consciousness. It feels familiar. It feels like me. So it's very easy to slip back into it. So there is the transmission, which people can do with crystals or peacock feathers or all kind of things, shouting pet and so on. But we need to remember what Garab Dorji says is open to the open. Second point is don't cover the open with your thoughts. And the third is just stay open. So easy to say, difficult to do. I want to be open, but I keep closing. Because closing feels like me. Of course it does. Me is a shape. So I have something to align with. Feels like me. The open doesn't feel like me. The open has no fixed content, yet it's always filling with the potential for participation and responsivity. But how can I just be open with all this potential? So the teaching says, don't hold your mind inside, don't hold the world outside. I am co-emergent with circumstances. Or to put it another way, sometimes the mind looks subject, sometimes it looks object. It's not a problem I have to solve. It's not a practice I have to do. I am within the emergent field. As part of the emergent field, I respond to the shifts in the emergent field. Sometimes it looks like I am shifting the shape of the field. Sometimes it looks that the field is shifting my shape. This is a dualistic interpretation. Dependent co-origination, shape is shifting, shape is shifting, shape. So if we stay like that, there's the transmission becomes real for us. Then he says how to receive transmission when it may not be possible to meet the teachers in the East. We do our best. If you formulate some kind of ideal situation and you know how it should be, then you are going to be disappointed. But if you open yourself in the various situations you can encounter, responding to the pulsations of the environment around you, praying to Padmasambhava or to Tara, and studying some of the basic texts that we have, then you start to see how you make your mind dull when it is actually bright. I am the darkener of the Buddha mind. So when I say, I am James, what is your profession, James? I am the darkener of the Buddha mind. So, James, why would you choose such a fucking stupid occupation? Because I'm stupid. Would you like to stop being stupid? I'm not sure. That's how we make sure we don't get the transmission. So now we come to the end for today. And in December, at the beginning, we have a weekend to look more at Mahamudra. So thank you to our translators. Without them, our work wouldn't proceed very well. And I hope what we've done tonight is some use to you. So I say goodbye. Bye bye bye. Bye bye bye. Bye bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Oh,
Bye.
thank
Bye. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Terima kasih ya, James.
Bye.
Bye.
grazie James.
Ciao.
Muito obrigado.
Muito obrigada.